Greetings one and all. Super Tuesdays here in the Holy Land, Holy Apple, on the Holy Hilltop in the Tal Binyamin Hilltop. Welcome. Today we are on the third day of the month of Tevet, 10th month of Tevet, 5783. Hope everybody had an uplifting and a special Hanukkah 8 days. Okay, we have really an extremely important class. Actually, this is going to be divided into two. Any way you could get it out, to share it, to whatever medium you have under your sleeve, try to get this out. This message must be heard, and not just by the few, as many as we can. Okay, the subject, with God's help. Breaking news, Jews. Come home to Israel now. The danger is real. Got the pun? The danger is real. Israel is real. Okay. A Pew study during a 20-year period of time, from the year 2001 to 2021, the following conclusions can be found in that Pew study. The amount of Reform Jewish institutions went down during that 20-year period by 17%. In 2001, there were 976 Reform institutions. A year ago, there were 812. Conservative institutions went down by 34%, double that of the Reform movement, from 865 in 2001 down to 572 in 2021. The opposite, the amount of Chabad, religious institutions, were up close to 400%. In 2001, there were 346 Chabad institutions. A year ago, they were up to 1,350. Not only that, not only is there a big shift downward for the conservative and Reform movements, but also there is a big shift that takes place amongst the younger Jews. Between the ages of 18 and 29, there is a much greater shift towards Orthodox Judaism than the Reform and conservative movements. Okay, so this information I found out through the Chabad weekly portion of the week sheet that comes out, and that gave me the incentive to give this class, because as you know, those that follow the class, we did a class on black anti-Semitism called Yay or Nay, a pun on Kanye West, of course, and I was going to leave it at that. However, when this report came out in Chabad, it really incited me to give these classes. So on one hand, we see one might say, thank God, we see a tremendous increase in religious Orthodox institutions, Chabad particularly. On the other hand, we have another type of reality, a cold reality. Anti-Semitic statistics of 2022, which, of course, we're still not over. This was These statistics are approximately a month old. This past year, even though there's a month or so to go, there was a month to go when the statistics came out, was up 34%. The amount of attacks up until 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, against Jews was 2,717, up 34% from last year's breaking record, 2021. That was the record-breaking year of anti-Semitic acts since they've been keeping track of this information. So that's an amazing thing. Last year, a year ago, was a record year, and this year already has broken by far, by 34%, this record. I was speaking to my aunt last night. She lives in Pasadena, California, and she told me that in her area, the Chabad were having a car parade with, they have like the menorahs on the top of their cars, and there were police escorts in front and also in back. I said, why is there a police escort? She said, you know how much hatred, you know how much dangers there are? They need a police escort. I mean, mind-boggling to go around with a couple of cars. You need and you have a menorah on top, you need a police escort. Now, this is an amazing statistic here, the statistics of the year 2022, because these 2,717 complaints are people that had enough get up and go, enough oomph in them to make a complaint. Most people in our times, they're just going to let it blow over. They will not make an effort and try to find, okay, who do I call? Who do I call here to complain? And then you got to spend your time. Most people the overwhelming majority of people do not do that. So what are the real statistics? Where the real stats stand up? That is frightening. Not the 2717. That's frightening. But what's really frightening is the overwhelming majority, it is safe to say, have not been reported. 60% of hate crimes in the United States of America are directed towards Jews. 60% of all hate crimes. Remember these numbers. And I cry out, OMG, oh my gosh, when anti-Semitism presents a real threat to Jews, who gives? How many synagogues or institutions or yeshivas or Jewish day schools you have? Who cares? Jews waving the flag. How many Chabad houses have been opened up? Don't get me wrong. Chabad do great things. I have relatives that are the greatest Jews of all. I wish that I could be at their feet. But that's not the issue over here. When there is a danger to the Jewish people, who cares how many Chabad houses, yeshivas, Jewish day schools there are? What happened 80 years ago in Europe? Did anybody care how many synagogues, how many communities, how many yeshivas, institutions were around? They were all wiped out. This is, to me, mind-boggling. This is what you have to wave to the public? How many institutions, how many Orthodox institutions there are? This is the time to wave how many play the number games? When there is a real danger to the Jewish community of America. When on the Sabbath there is a possible, not a for sure, not a certain danger, when there is a possible danger to life, we take the laws of Sabbath, so to speak, and we toss them out the window. Because even a question of a danger takes precedence over the laws of Sabbath. It all takes a back seat to life. When there's a danger on the Sabbath, the laws take a back seat, and we take care of business, and we remove that possible danger. Have we lost our minds, dear friends? Have we lost our minds? Who cares how many synagogues, who cares how many institutions the religious people have? Can't we smell the coffee? Can't we see the handwriting on the wall? The Jewish people, so brilliant in the sciences, in life, when it comes to saving themselves, are so stupid. Okay? We spoke about the Three Musketeers. We have Kyrie Irving. We have Kanye West. And we have Dave Chappelle. These are a few. These are the stars with tens of millions of followers. Have the sanctions, the monetary sanctions, worked, or have they backfired? Well, if we would ask Ben Shapiro, who's a very, very brilliant person, on a lot of issues he's right on. But as I said, Jews who are so smart in business are so stupid when it comes to saving themselves. Ben Shapiro comes out and claims that the words of Ye aren't influencing anybody. What a joke. Ben, what a joke. Ye himself has 30 million followers on Twitter. More than this, Ye has succeeded in uniting for the first time white and black extremists. Look it up on YouTube. Look at this united stand against the Jewish people. White extremists and black extremists getting together in the same bed, sleeping in the same bed. Amazing. And Ben Shapiro closing his eyes, no influence, 30 million followers. The average bear looks out at these monetary boycotts against Ye and against Kyrie, and they say, you know what? The Jews really do have too much power. Look at all these boycotts they're pulling. Look at all their clout. Backfiring. Oh, you wanted to prove, Jews, you wanted to prove that you're not really so powerful. and that Hollywood is not run, the governments are not run by Jews. Well, you're shooting yourself in the leg with these financial boycotts. And more so, during periods in history of fear, social, political, economical, unrest, turmoil, the message sinks in. Perhaps in regular times, perhaps it doesn't. But in our times, when the earth is shaking, the message has sunk in. The message is sinking in. Every day goes by, more followers, more believers, more hate. Jealousy. Jews overly represented in society. Let's look at another Pew study in 2020. Jewish wealth compared to the average American non-Jew. Listen closely to the differences. People, we'll start with the Jews. Jews that make less than $30,000 a year, that's the poverty line. Of 100% Jews, there are 10% of Jews that are poor, that make less than $30,000 a year. On the other hand, an average Gentile, 26% of the population, 100% of the non-Jewish population, 26% make less than $30,000. When we talk about from the bracket of people that make $30,000 to $50,000, there are 11% of Jews that make that amount of money compared to 22% of the non-Jews. So that one is a switch for the better. 50,000 to 100,000, 26% of Jews make that amount of money. 32% of non-Jews make that money. So that's pretty similar. From 100,000 to 150,000, now we're going to really switch. Here's where the switch comes. When we talk about those that make 100,000 to 150,000, there are 18% of Jews that make that amount of money compared to only 11% of Gentiles that make that money. From the bracket of $150,000 a year to $200,000, 13% of Jews make that amount of money compared to only 4% of the non-Jewish world. And here's where the ball is hit out of the stadium, and it's still going. For those that make $200,000 or more, 23% of the Jewish community in America make more than $200,000 a year compared to only 4% of the non-Jewish world. So, in other words, when we come to 150,000 and more, 36% of Jews make that money, 150,000 and more, compared to only 8% of non-Jews. So there's no surprise here. Of jealousy and how the Jewish people stick out. This is not a secret study that was done. This is the Pew institution here. one option, one school of thought that we hear more and more. To educate, we must educate the anti-Semites. We must educate them. This is really amazing. Kyrie Irving, yay, receiving invitations, invos to tour the Holocaust Museum. Now listen to this closely. Listen to this closely. On CBS it was reported that since the Holocaust Museum invited Ye to come down, they offered him a private tour of the Holocaust Museum, I think in Washington. The amount, they are overwhelmed. The Holocaust Museum is overwhelmed with anti-Semitic messages. Backfiring? Ben Shapiro says it's not influencing anyone. I would say backfire. Let's just educate them. That's the problem. Let's just get them into those Holocaust museums. And then anti-Semitism will disappear. This was reported on November 7th, 2022. Kyrie Irving was faced with six conditions to continue playing basketball. One of them was to meet representatives of the ADL as well as Jewish community leaders. This will for sure change his mind. On a very popular podcast, it has over 1 million subscribers, called Abba and Preach. That's ABA and then the letter N, Preach. They recently had a show called Why Folks Don't Care About Anti-Semitism. You think they're bothered by this financial boycott of Adidas or of the Gap? That's the show. We couldn't give about your boycott. People don't care about anti-Semitism. Preach said the following: when I was growing up as a teenager in the 90s, we were listening to the hip-hop, we were listening to the rappers, and there was almost no rapper song or hip-hop that wasn't complaining about the Jewish bosses that control us. That's what we grew up with. It's in the blood, pun intended. It's in the blood. Do you think that these financial boycotts are moving the population? If anything, these boycotts are inciting. These boycotts are infuriating the masses. In fact, this was said. There's a Jewish, I don't remember his name, but when you look up this program, this podcast of Abba and Preach, You could see it because they quote him. A Jewish star in Hollywood, totally against these boycotts. What's his answer? His answer is education. We have to sit down and explain. Nonsense. All of this is nonsense. The financial boycotts, irrelevant. Educating the anti-Semites, irrelevant. Stupidity. Let's stop all of this nonsense. I'll tell you what the issue is. Straight, black and white. There is a law. There is a law of nature. Esav soneh liYaakov. There is a law of nature. Yishmael soneh Yitzchak. Translated, there is a law of nature that the non-Jewish world hate the Jewish people, whether they're the Muslim world or the Christian world. That is the problem. Folks, this is the law of nature, this hatred. Jews were hated because they were poor. And then Jews were hated because they were rich. Jews were hated because they were not involved in society. They separated themselves, isolated themselves. Jews were then hated because they were involved with the non-Jewish society instead of remaining isolated. Jews were hated because they were communists or socialists or capitalists. Jews were hated because they were religious. Jews were hated because they were assimilated and not religious. Jews were hated because they were weak. Jews were hated because they were strong. Jews were hated because society was primitive. Jews were hated because of technology advancements, technological advancements. Jews were hated because they did not have a state, a government, and an army. Jews are hated because they have a state, because they have a government, and because they have an army. What we call an LL situation. Lose-lose. No win-win. Our sages tell us the bitter truth, the wake-up call. And it's about time we wake up and smell the coffee. Stop this nonsense. Sages tell us in Midrash Rabbah, Breshit Rabbah, 63:6. The hatred between Esav, who represents the nations of the world, and Jacob, who represents the Jewish people, began not at birth, but at conception. This goes tremendously much deeper than once a person comes into the world. This is from conception. But the hatred goes back even further, dear friends. Abraham, when Abraham came to the world, the zodiac forecasters came up to the king of Babylonia, Nimrod, and told him, listen, we see in the stars, we see that there will, in the next couple of weeks, there will be someone born into the world that will bring a revolution against idol worshiping to the world, and he must be stopped. He must be killed. So Abraham, when he was born, his parents had to hide him. He was hidden for 13 years. And then, when he was 13 years old, he was caught and put into prison for another 10 years. And then after that, the king of Babylonia put him into the fire for his beliefs. Isaac, the hatred against the Jews continued with Abraham's son Isaac. If you look in Genesis chapter 26, every well that Isaac and his assistants, every well that they dug was closed, sealed shut by the Philistines. Isaac was forced to leave the Philistine area because of tremendous hatred against him. Jacob comes to the White House, the house of Lavan, pun intended, comes to Lavan's house. Lavan is a poor fellow. His daughter has to go out with the sheep. He has no money. He has no sons. He has no money to pay men to go out with the sheep and tend the sheep. Economically, Lavan is in poverty, and that all changes. That all changes. 20 years Jacob spends at the White House, the house of Lavan, and everything changes. Lavan becomes a well-to-do person thanks to Jacob. Did this help educate these benefits that Jacob brought to Lavan and to the people of Padan? Did this help their love of the Jewish people? Not 1 inch. Even though Jacob was responsible for the good fortune, for the total turnaround in the economy of Padan Aram, it was all forgotten. Jealousy. And Lavan came with his men, with his army, to kill Jacob, the same Jacob that saved that city. The same Jacob, when he comes to the city of Shechem, in the land of Israel, what the Gentiles called Nablus. When he comes there, we are told in the tractate of Shabbat, on page 33b, Jacob comes, and you know what he does for the city of Shechem? Amazing. 3 things that he does. He sets up bathhouses in the city. Hygiene. Improve the hygiene of the entire city of Shechem. That's an amazing thing. Bring them out of the sewers. Contributes to society. Makes a currency for them. Forms a currency for them. Sets up marketplaces, businesses. Folks, Did these life condition improvements, did this help the status of Jacob and his family? His daughter was raped. Dinah was raped. Where's the appreciation? Maybe the problem with Abraham, the problem with Isaac and Jacob, maybe they didn't have enough museums of anti-Semitism. Maybe they did not have enough, they didn't sit down and speak dialogue with the nations. Have we lost our minds? It is law. Esau hates Jacob. It is a law of nature. The Jews, Joseph goes down to Egypt. This week's portion, last week's portion. The Jews, Joseph is in Egypt. Later on the brothers come. Later on Jacob comes. Who saves Egypt from the 7 years of famine? Sure enough, Joseph. What kind of gratitude do the Egyptian people show the Jewish people? Do you understand? Joseph saved the economy. Joseph saved the people of Egypt from dying of famine, disease, and plagues. What was the gratitude shown? Look at all the benefits. Isaac, Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, how they benefit society. This has happened throughout history. The Jews have benefited society. There are books out that could be seen, that could be read. Statistics. Nobel Prizes, how many percent of them are Jews? 20% of all Nobel Prizes are Jews. Contributions. It does not translate into love because there is a law of nature. The Egyptian society showed their gratitude towards the Jewish people and enslaved the Jewish people for 210 years. 210 years the Jewish people were enslaved. Amongst those 210 years, 87 were extremely excruciating. 10,000 Jewish babies were killed, thrown into the Nile. There can be no denial in denial. Copyright that one. The Jews in the desert, passing by, attacked. What's going on? In a desert, they're not bothering anybody. They're not coming to attack anyone. They're on their way to the promised land. No, no, no. We will attack you. Because it is law that the nations of the world hate the Jewish people. Folks, do we honestly believe through education and perhaps Holocaust museums this will stop anti-Semitism? But one might say America is different. Oh, really? America is different. There is a dispute in the Talmud in many places between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and also Rabbi Yehudah. The dispute surrounds the question, when the Torah gives us a little bit of a peek, preview, a little bit of a reason, understanding of a certain commandment, can we expand based on the logic and rhyme and reason? Can we expand this law, this idea to other cases? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says yes. If the Torah gives us a hand, if it gives us a preview, an understanding, we could take that understanding and take the ball and keep on running with it. To expand it, to expand the law. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, every time he looked at a verse in the Torah, he's looking for reason and to expand on the reason. There has to be some logic, reason, and he goes further. Rabbi Yehudah says no. What the Torah says we do, and not beyond that. We don't expand the idea. I'll give an example so it's clear. But once again, this could be found all over the Talmud. This, you could look it up, for example, in one place, in the Tractate of Bava Metzia, page 115, side A. So, there is a verse that's brought down in Deuteronomy 24:17, when somebody takes a loan. So, when somebody takes a loan, there are various laws that the Torah give to different types of economical situations that people are in. There's a regular Joe who's in a okay predicament, and he takes a loan. Now, the person that loaned out the money, he, let's say, at a certain stage wants a collateral to make sure, a guarantee to make sure that he will receive the money. So, he is not allowed to enter the house of the person that borrowed the money. The person that borrowed the money has to come out and give a collateral to guarantee that the loan will be paid off. However, then there are people that are poor. In such a situation, when a person is poor, so in such a situation, if they give you some kind of clothing which also serves as a blanket, so people used to walk around with a type of garment that was not just the garment that you walked with outside, it was also a garment that they would use as a blanket to keep warm in the cold weather. So, this could be used also as a collateral. So, however, the person that lent the money, he must come every day before sunset and return the garment to the poor person so he's able to keep warm at night. So that's the second degree. After that, we have a widow, a woman that lost her husband. Here, the Torah teaches us that you are not even allowed to take a garment, because the Torah looks at this woman, as she is on the scale of a regular person and then a poor person. She is considered to be the bottom of the chain, the weakest link of the chain, and therefore the Torah has mercy on her and says you cannot come and take a collateral from her, even to return it before sunset. So, therefore, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would say, listen, okay, now if I understand there's a widow, I can include this law to speak about other types of people that are downtrodden and are on the bottom link of the chain. On the other hand, Rabbi Yehudah says, no, it says a widow. We're only talking about a widow. Don't bring me other types of people who have been dealt with a lot of trouble, with a lot of different difficulties in their life, different blows. No, the law is just the widow. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, no, I will expand this law to include other people that are downtrodden. So listen to this, folks. The amazing rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, the Holy of Holies, Rabbi Menachem Zamba, may his blood be avenged. Rabbi Menachem Zamba is not a person. Rabbi Menachem Zamba is an angel. I highly recommend take some time out and look up. There are books about Rabbi Menachem Zamba. He was one of the leading rabbis of Europe of the entire generation. He was an unbelievable. He had dozens of books. Unfortunately, we have 4 or 5. They were destroyed in Europe, never to be found. Rabbi Menachem Zamba, a Jewish hero who supported the revolt, the uprising of the Warsaw Ghetto. He was always the first one that donated money to the cause of the uprising. And he turned to the Jews and said, and he wrote this, that they say about us Jews that we are so smart, but we are not, we are so stupid. And they say that the Gentiles, we say sometimes the Gentiles are not smart, but they are smart. And it's about time that we stopped going to our deaths voluntarily. It's time that we stood up and fought. Rav Menachem Zamba, who throughout the poverty, the death, the plagues, the disease, throughout this period of time, he continued, he pushed, and the learning yeshivot, they continued to learn. And he continued through it all, through the hell that was life. He continued his study of Torah, but not just any study of Torah. He recorded almost daily new ideas, deep ideas that he had come up with within the Torah. This was not a man, this was an angel. Listen to what he writes. Rav Menachem Zamba. He writes in his book, one of 4 or 5 that still remain. In his book of Chidushim, New Torah Ideas, chapter 48, he writes the following. He talks about when we look at anti-Semitism throughout the generations, he shows the contradictions that the Jews were hated because of contradictions. As we mentioned, poor because they were rich, they influenced, they didn't influence. He goes through a whole list himself. But then he says, in all of the Talmud, we notice that Rabbi Shimon is constantly looking for logic and reason behind the verses of the Torah. I don't know if we mentioned this, but in Hebrew it's called Tama Dikra, the logic, the reason behind the verses. That's what the dispute between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yehudah is. So the same Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is constantly, always looking at the Torah, at the verses, and he's looking for reason and logic. Here, the same Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he tells us that there is a law. No reason, no rhyme. There is a law of nature, that Esav hates Jacob, the nations hate the Jewish people. There is no logic. There is no reason behind the hatred. It is a law of nature. The words of the holy Rabbi Menachem Zamba, the rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto. Folks, this law of nature is brought down in the Mechilta, chapter 69, portion of Baalotcha. Check it out. But even before the Torah was given, with all of the commandments, this was the law of nature. And when the Torah was given, this was signed, sealed, and delivered. If there was hatred, a law of nature that the nations hated the Jewish people before the giving of the Torah, how much more so? Multiply it 1,000,000 times over. How much more so when the Torah was given? In fact, the Talmud, in Tractate of Shabbat, page 99, sign A, it says, why? Where does this name Sinai, the mountain of Sinai, where does that name stem from, come from? What is the origin? And it tells us an amazing thing, that when God gave Torah to the Jewish people, this brought down not only the Torah, but it brought down hatred. Sinai and Sinah, very similar words. So that is what the Torah tells us. When God separated the Jewish people and made them a chosen people with a Torah with 613 commandments compared to the 7 laws of the nations of the world, this separation, this Torah brought down jealousy. This Torah brought down hatred. Who are you? The world does not want to hear about morality. The Jewish people are a constant reminder of morality, of what is decent and what is just. And the world just doesn't want to hear it. Let us live our lives like we want to, as we see fit. We don't need an echo in our ear of a conscience. We don't want to live with a conscience. The Jewish people are the conscience of the world. Folks, we will stand here for this class, and don't touch that dial. With God's help, we will be back. Get it out. Get the message out. This must be heard. The final part, with God's help, next week. Till then.